Travel back with me, if you will, to a fall day 2 years and 2 months ago, to a day when the woolly caterpillars were on a frantic search to find their perfect overwintering spot, and a day when my hair was still brown, thanks to the bottle. A day when I decided I wanted to share our favorite soup recipe with you. I got stuck trying to decide how much to share in one video. I guess it took me 2 years and 2 months to decide. But better late than never, because I predict you're going to love this soup as much as we do. Hey guys, I'm sitting out in my backyard, hiding kind of, because there's a bunch of activity going on in the house. There's no way I could record this in there. Dave is setting up some sort of, what did he call it? There's a converter and a battery, and I think it's some kind of power station, so that if we lose power, he just has to open the trunk of this. It's actually a really neat old steamer trunk that we found at a thrift store one time, just really old and really big, but it's fitting his power station in there really well. So all we have to do really is open the lid, and he connects a couple things, I think, and we have power again, or we can, run the fridge or something. But it's so funny how Dave always wants to share those things with me. I mean, I feel the same way, I'm sure, when I'm working on an herbal something, although he is kind of interested in that. But I don't know, we were at, what was it, Coastal? Do you guys have Coastal where you are? We were at Coastal one day, and no, it couldn't have been Coastal, because I actually like Coastal. It was sort of a Radio Shack-ish. Oh no, I know what it was. It was Harbor Freight. And I don't know, I start getting a little queasy every time I walk in there. I feel like my estrogen just gets out of whack, and I need for him to go with me to Joann Fabric or something to kind of get my equilibrium back, because I don't want to know anything about anything that's in that store, if you know what I mean. One of my friends has asked me a couple different times, rather impatiently, when I'm going to post the pictures of that. No need for names, you know who you are. But I think you'd love this soup. We all love this soup. And everyone I've ever served it to has asked for the recipe pretty much. I didn't come up with it, but I tweak it here and there, and everybody makes it different. We really like heat. So we put a lot more chili powder in than a lot of people I've noticed do. Some people don't like beans as much as we do, so they do 1 can, but you'll see as we go along what I'm talking about. I also did mention on another video that I was doing these meal kits to make mealtime easier for myself or for Dave for when I go back to work, and I wanted to do this for the Cabbage Patch Soup. I'll show you how you can just take all the dehydrated stuff you need for this. Well, I say all, but it's just the hamburger, which I did on the last video, and then I'm going to show you how to do cabbage. And we will put those together with the soup and the tomatoes and the beans and the spices, and there's dinner. You just have it in a bag, you're ready to go. So I'm excited to share those with you, because I mentioned it to my sister Terry, and she's asked me a couple times, so are you going to do those kits? When are you going to do the kits? Are you doing the kits on the Cabbage Patch Soup today? I mean, it was, I think she's a little bit excited about it, but she works too. When you work, you really are kind of ready to grasp at any old thing that will make dinner time easier. And by the way, this soup just about single-handedly gets Dave and I through the winter every year. I'm not kidding. He's told me he could eat this every single day. Can't go wrong when somebody likes it that much. So there you go. To make this delectable soup, you're going to need 1 pound of hamburger, which I'll show you in a moment, 1 28-ounce can of diced tomatoes, 2 15-ounce cans of red kidney beans, 8 cups of cabbage, and then either some beef broth, about 2 to 4 cups. You'll see later why you don't know yet how much you're going to need, or a giant scoop of Better Than Bouillon beef base, or you could use dried bouillon also. We'll put the seasoning in a little bit. You're going to need 2 to 4 tablespoons of chili powder, depending on how hot you like it. And also, if you have onion that you want to dice up and throw in with your hamburger, you can. Or if you want to put some dried onion flakes in, you can also do that when you add the water. And then, of course, salt and pepper. Sometimes I throw a little cayenne in there. The bare bones is just the chili powder and salt and pepper, but you can fancy it up any way you like. Right about the time when your hamburger loses all its pinkness, you want to throw your spices in. What that does is, if you cook it for just 2 or 3 minutes, it's going to bring a little bit of life back to those spices. Then pour a little bit of water into the pan, to deglaze it. And what that means is that the water is going to pick up all those little bits of brown deliciousness that are on the bottom of the pan. Now start adding your tomatoes, the beans, and by the way, you don't have to drain the beans if you don't want. I sometimes pour a little bit of the liquid out, but I'm not too worried about that. Once you get that all stirred up together, you're going to add about 2 cups of water and then all your cabbage. What you're going to see is whether or not the water will come up over your cabbage. I wish I could make this more of a science for you, but honestly, I'm not that kind of cook. Everything's kind of with a look and a see. So as you add the cabbage, do about half and then stir it up. Then add the second half and stir it, and then pour a little bit more water in there. Now, as you see, I am getting the last little bit of my beef bouillon base out of there. I can tell you right now that before this is through, I will probably add another big scoop out of a new one because I never can quite let it go at that. And I also will probably add more chili because we really do like for it to be hot. Now you're going to start adding about half of the cabbage. You want to just put a few handfuls in there, tuck it down in with your spoon, and then you're going to add about 2 cups of water to this to cover it. Then you're going to repeat the process with the cabbage and a little bit more water. And I really do wish I could give this to you as an exact science, but cooking isn't like that. When I first was married and trying out all kinds of new recipes to see what Dave would like, I followed everything to the letter, but I pretty quickly let go of that. Whereas baking really is a science because you have so many different chemical things going on between baking soda and baking powder and all the different things that go into baking, and you do want to measure that out pretty carefully. Cooking, on the other hand, is more of an art, and it really doesn't matter what the recipe says. It matters what you like. So I've always considered a recipe to be just a starting point. The more you make things, the more you're going to understand kind of the natural process of them, and you're going to figure out what you really do like about it and what you want to change. I promise you, after you've made this a couple of times, you'll be able to make it in your sleep. Add a little salt and pepper at this point, and I wouldn't recommend tasting it right yet because it's not going to taste like much. But once it's gone through the cooking process, you can taste and refine a little bit more. Now you have a couple of choices as to how to proceed. I'm going to make this in my Instant Pot today because I am a little pressed for time. But if you don't have one, don't worry about it. You can make this in a crock pot, or you can cook it on the stove and just keep an eye on it all day. The longer it cooks, the better it's going to taste, so just keep that in mind. And boy, will your kitchen smell great in the morning. If you do use an Instant Pot, you'll want to cook it on the soup mode for about 45 minutes. If you cook it in the crock pot, you can even do that overnight. Now that you know how to make Cabbage Patch Soup using fresh hamburger and cabbage, I want to show you how you can dehydrate the cabbage. This is a game changer because along with the dehydrated hamburger that I showed you in a previous video, this enables you to put together a kit that is shelf stable, and you can make this anytime you want. Okay, I'm going to try not to talk too much during this portion of the video because there's something about the sound of this cabbage crunching that my granddaughter Maddie would call oddly satisfying. Good phrase, Maddie. I really do love the sound of that crunch. But first, come on, have you ever seen a cabbage that big? I went out to my favorite farmer's market to pick up some different vegetables, and when I saw this, I couldn't help but buy it. If we don't speed this up, we're going to be here all day. So now you just want to pull out your dehydrator trays and start piling the cabbage on. You don't have to worry about it overlapping. It's just fine if it's touching a bit. As I mentioned in the last video, I am using an Excalibur dehydrator with the timer, but you can do this with any dehydrator you have. Just a word here about blanching. If you're new to dehydrating, blanching is a process where you take the vegetable or the fruit and drop it in boiling water for a short period of time, usually 3 to 4 minutes, before pulling it out and then rinsing it and dropping it in cold water. And the reason people do that is because blanching during the time in the hot water will destroy enzymes that could otherwise survive the dehydration process and cause the food quality to decline faster. But I am a non-blancher when it comes to cabbage, and you can look on the internet, you're going to find, like everything else in the world, this is a topic where people are divided on. There's the blanchers and the non-blanchers, but you just do what works for you. For me, I already know that the cabbage is going to look like the chili that it's going to be swimming in when it's all done. So I don't care about the color. And I've never found that cabbage degrades to any point where it becomes dark and nasty looking, the way potatoes will if you do not blanch them. So that's just a little word about that. You know your dehydrator best. For mine, I typically will dehydrate cabbage between 125 and 145 degrees. It can take from 7 to 11 hours, which seems like a big spread, but it all depends on your humidity. So you want to keep an eye on it, check it periodically, and you will know when it's ready because it's going to crunch. There will be absolutely no bend. And one other thing, just one last thing, is you want to make sure that this cools down completely before you put it in your jar or your baggie or whatever you're going to store it in. Otherwise, it's going to cause condensation, and moisture is the enemy of all dehydrated food, so we want to avoid that at all costs. Each quart-sized jar holds 2 head of cabbage, so you can see that it takes up so much less space. Now we're ready to make Cabbage Patch Soup. Alrighty, as you can see, I have all my spices out on the counter, and I also have a couple of little round containers that have lids. I actually got those at Dollar Tree. I think I got 10 in a pack for $1.25, which you can't beat. I'm filling one of those with 4 tablespoons of chili powder. As I said earlier, you may want to start with just 2 tablespoons. Into another one, I'm going to add about 1.5 tablespoons of dehydrated onion flakes. And to that, I'm going to add some garlic. I think I just did about 1/2 tablespoon. And then I will add some salt and pepper. I had to find a substitute for the Better Than Bouillon that I like to use, because obviously that needs to stay in the refrigerator. But I found this really concentrated beef bouillon powder on Amazon, and I will link to that below. And it's just fabulous. It only took about 1.5 teaspoons, and it matched the flavor that I would have gotten from all the bouillon I normally use. Now, when I am making these kits, I do a whole bunch at once. So I don't necessarily always divide out my spices the way I have here, but I wanted you to see what goes into each. I don't throw all the spices in with the dehydrated hamburger or the cabbage though, because I always feel like I'm leaving too much of my spices in the bottom of those baggies. But you can just combine these as you need to in these little containers, or you could put the entire thing in one giant Ziploc if you wanted. Now you're going to take 1 cup of your dehydrated hamburger, and remember 1 cup, when it's rehydrated, is going to equal 1 pound of hamburger. I like to put the hamburger, in this recipe at least, into those little tiny snack bags that you can get with the regular size baggies. 1 cup fits perfectly in there. You're going to use 2 cups of the cabbage, and that will yield you just under 8 cups of cabbage when it's rehydrated. So for that, you're going to need a regular quart-size baggie. I always measure the first kit that I'm making, but after that, you can pretty much just eyeball it. You have the one to go by, and that becomes your standard for all the other little baggies. It goes pretty quickly when you do it that way. I've linked to the plastic bins that I used for this, but you can pick them up just about anywhere. And because Dave likes to cook once in a while when I'm not home and surprise me, I made several copies of the recipe and just taped them to the inside of the lid. You'll want to make sure that on the front you label which recipe this is, because once you start making these meal kits, your mind is going to start working and you'll think of a bunch of other recipes that you can do like this. And there you have it, really just a simple way to make your life easier. I have linked also to the video in which I show you how to dehydrate hamburger. This was back before I had my freeze dryer. Now I pretty much freeze dry everything, but for this, dehydrating works just fine. I really hope you'll give this a try. If you do, please come back and tell me what you thought. Thanks so much for watching and listening.